Algebra with parentheses. This is another Pie Crustable Math Shorts. It's not magic, it's math. In this math shorts, first we're going to look at the process on how to solve algebraic equations with parentheses. Then I'm going to show you some examples, and there's always a self-quiz to test to see how you did. Finally, I'm going to give you some video tasks. You always have to practice before you can get really good at it. So let's look at the process. The first thing that you always want to do is simplify both sides of the equation by using the distributive property and combining like terms. Then you want to isolate the variable or the letter on one side of the equation by adding and subtracting. Number 3, solve for the variable by dividing. That means you want to get x equals or y equals. And then finally we're going to check. Let's look at the first one. Solve -2 parentheses w plus 5 equals 8. The first thing that we have to do is simplify, and that includes using the distributive property. I'm going to take -2 times w plus -2 times 5, and that equals 8. Now we need to simplify. -2 times w is -2w, -2 times 5 is -10, and it still equals 8. Now we want to get -2w by itself. So we look at -10. What's the opposite of a -10 or subtracting 10? Yeah, it's adding 10. So I'm going to add 10 to both sides of the equal sign. Remember, we have to keep things balanced. That gives me -2w equals 18. Now we need to isolate the variable. That means we want to get w by itself. Whenever I have a number next to a letter, that means to multiply. The opposite of multiplying is dividing. And we're going to divide by whatever is hooked to the variable. And in this case, it's -2. So it turns out that w equals -9. But let's check it. What I'm going to do is put -9 in for w in the original equation. We need to follow orders of operations, so -9 plus 5 is -4. -2 times -4 is 8, 8 equals 8, and yes, w equals -9 is our solution. Let's look at the next one. We're going to solve 8 times, parentheses, 3x minus 5 equals 8. First thing that we have to do is simplify. So I'm going to use the distributive property. I'm going to take 8 times 3x plus 8 times -5 equals 8. Let's do some simplifying. 8 times 3 is 24x. 8 times -5 is -40, and that equals 8. Now we want to get 24x by itself. So I have a -40. The opposite of subtracting, or a negative, is adding or a positive. So I'm going to add 40 to both sides of the equal sign. This gives me 24x equals 48, and now I really want to get the letter by itself. Whenever I have a number next to a letter, that means to multiply. And the opposite of multiplying is dividing. So I'm going to divide both sides by 24, and x equals 2. Now we have to check it. So the first thing you're going to do is substitute 2 in for x. We need to follow the orders of operations, so we have to do what's in parentheses first. 3 times 2 is 6, 6 minus 5 is 1, and 8 times 1 is 8. Yay! We did it right. X equals 2. Let's look at the last one. I have 3 times z minus 5 equals 2 times 6 minus z plus 3. We need to simplify, and it looks like we have the distributive property on both sides of our equal sign. I'm going to take 3 times z plus 3 times -5 equals 2 times 6 plus 2 times -z, and then plus 3. I'm not taking 2 times 3 because 3 is not in the parentheses. Let's simplify. 3 times z is 3z. 3 times -5 is -15. 2 times 6 is 12. 2 times -z is -2z, and then we have the plus 3. We still have to simplify. On the left side of the equal sign, we can't combine like terms there. They're not like. But on the right side, we have 12 and 3. What I'd like to do is put like terms next to each other and then simplify. On the left side, we're still going to have 3z minus 15, but 12 plus 3 is 15 minus 2z. Now we need to get all of the z's on one side and all of the numbers on the other side. I like to put the z's on the left side, so I'm going to add 2z to both sides of the equal sign. This gives us 5z minus 15 equals 15. Now I want 5z to stay there, so the opposite of subtracting 15 is adding 15. So I'm going to add 15s to both sides of the equal sign, which gives me 5z equals 30. Well, I want to know what z is. I don't want to know what 5z is. Since I have a number and a letter next to each other, that means to multiply. The opposite of multiplying is dividing. So I'm going to divide by 5 on both sides of the equal sign. This gives me z equals 6, but we still want to check it. So what we're going to do is we're going to put 6 in for all of the z's in our original equation. We're going to follow orders of operations. 6 minus 5 is 1. 6 minus 6 is 0. 3 times 1 is 3. And then we have 0 plus 3 on the right-hand side. And we have 3 equals 3. Since that's true, 3 equals 3, then yes, z equals 6 is our solution. Let's look at the last one. I have 3 times z minus 5 equals 2 times 6 minus z plus 3. We need to simplify, and it looks like we have the distributive property on both sides of our equal sign. I'm going to take 3 times z plus 3 times negative 5 equals 2 times 6 plus 2 times negative z, and then plus 3. I'm not taking 2 times 3 because 3 is not in the parentheses. Let's simplify. 3 times z is 3z. 3 times negative 5 is negative 15. 2 times 6 is 12. 2 times negative z is negative 2z, and then we have the plus 3. We still have to simplify. On the left side of the equal sign, we can't combine like terms there. They're not like. But on the right side, we have 12 and 3. What I'd like to do is put like terms next to each other and then simplify. On the left side, we're still going to have 3z minus 15. But 12 plus 3 is 15 minus 2z. Now we need to get all of the z's on one side and all of the numbers on the other side. I like to put the z's on the left side, so I'm going to add 2z to both sides of the equal sign. This gives us 5z minus 15 equals 15. Now I want 5z to stay there, so the opposite of subtracting 15 is adding 15. So I'm going to add 15s to both sides of the equal sign, which gives me 5z equals 30. Well, I want to know what z is. I don't want to know what 5z is. Since I have a number and a letter next to each other, that means to multiply. The opposite of multiplying is dividing. So I'm going to divide by 5 on both sides of the equal sign. This gives me z equals 6, but we still want to check it. So what we're going to do is we're going to put 6 in for all of the z's in our original equation. We're going to follow orders of operations. 6 minus 5 is 1. 6 minus 6 is 0. 3 times 1 is 3. And then we have 0 plus 3 on the right-hand side. And we have 3 equals 3. Since that's true, 3 equals 3, then yes, z equals 6 is our solution. Now that we've learned the process, let's look at some examples. If you feel like you have this under control, why don't you pause the video and try a couple, and then press play to check. Otherwise, let's look at the first one together. We're going to solve 7 times 3w plus 8 equals negative 28. Well, I can definitely see we have the distributive property because we have a 7 next to a parentheses and we have 3w plus 8 inside the parentheses. I'm going to take 7 times 3w plus 7 times 8 equals negative 28. Let's simplify. 7 times 3w is 21w, 7 times 8 is 56, and it still equals negative 28. We need to get 21w by itself. So I have plus 56. The opposite of adding is subtracting. So I'm going to subtract 56 from both sides of the equal sign. This gives us 21w equals negative 84. But I don't want to know what 21w is. I want to know what w is. Anytime I have a number next to a variable or a letter, that means to multiply. The opposite of multiplying is dividing. So I'm going to divide by 21 on both sides of the equal sign. This gives us w equals negative 4. But let's check just to make sure we're right. I'm going to put negative 4 in for w and follow the orders of operations. So 3 times negative 4 is negative 12. Negative 12 plus 8 is negative 4. And 7 times negative 4 is negative 28. And yes, our answer is w equals negative 4. I circled it a little too soon, but that's okay. Let's do the next one. We're going to solve 4 times 4w minus 3 equals 11 plus 7w. The first thing we have to do is the distributive property. I'm going to take 4 times negative 4w, then 4 times negative 3 equals 11 plus 7w. Let's simplify. 4 times negative 4w is negative 16w. 4 times negative 3 is negative 12, and we still have 11 plus 7w. There isn't anything left to simplify. Now we want to get all of the variables or letters on one side of the equal sign and everything else on the other side. I have a positive 7w. The opposite of adding is subtracting. So I'm going to subtract 7w from both sides of the equal sign. This gives me negative 23w minus 12 equals 11. So now we have the w, or the variable, on one side. We need to get rid of the negative 12. Well, what's the opposite of a negative 12 or a subtract 12? Yeah, we have to add it. We're going to add 12 to both sides of the equal sign, and that gives us negative 23w equals 23. But we don't want to know negative 23w. We want to know w. Anytime we have a number next to a letter, that means to multiply. And the opposite of multiplying is dividing. Now we always divide by whatever is hooked to the letter, and in this case it's negative 23. So I'm going to divide by negative 23 on both sides of the equal sign, and we think w is negative 1, but we have to check. I'm going to put negative 1 in for all of the w's and follow orders of operations. Negative 4 times 1 is 4. 7 times negative 1 is negative 7. 4 minus 3 is 1. 11 plus negative 7 is 4. And 4 times 1 is 4, so 4 equals 4. So yes, w equals negative 1. Let's look at the next one. We're going to solve negative parentheses d plus 2 equals 5 parentheses 4 minus d and parentheses plus 2. Now this one may be a little confusing, but you know what? That negative in front just means the opposite. We could also think of it as being a negative 1 times d plus 2. And that's how I'm going to work it. I'm going to take negative 1 times d plus negative 1 times 2 equals 5 times 4 plus 5 times negative d plus 2. Now I didn't take 5 times 2 because 2 is not in the parentheses. Let's continue by simplifying. Negative 1 times d is negative d, or we could say negative 1d. Negative 1 times 2 is negative 2. 5 times 4 is 20. 5 times negative d is negative 5d, and then we have plus 2. We need to combine like terms. Well, on the left side of the equation, we have negative d minus 2, and those are not like terms. We can't put them together. But if we look at the right side of the equation, we have 20 minus 5d plus 2. 20 and 2 are like terms, so we're going to put them together. 20 plus 2 is 22. So we end up with negative d minus 2 equals 22 minus 5d. We want all the d's, or the letters, on the left side and everything else on the right side. So the opposite of subtracting 5d is adding 5d. Now I'm going to do that to both sides of the equal sign. So I end up with 4d minus 2 equals 22. We need to get the 4d by itself. So the opposite of subtracting 2 is adding 2. Remember, we have to do it to both sides of the equal sign. That gives us 4d equals 24. Anytime a number is hooked to a variable, That means to multiply. The opposite of multiplying is dividing. So we're going to divide by 4 on both sides of the equal sign, and that gives us D equals 6. Let's check it. I'm going to put 6 in for the D's. Follow our orders of operations. So 6 plus 2 is 8. 4 minus 6 is negative 2. Negative 8 is negative 8. 5 times negative 2 is negative 10 plus 2. And negative 10 plus 2 is negative 8. And look at that. Yes, indeedy, D equals 6 is our solution. Let's look at the last one. We're going to solve 5 times t minus 7 equals 8 times t minus 3 plus 1. We're going to use the distributive property on the left side and the right side. So first, we're going to take 5 times t plus 5 times negative 7 equals 8 times t plus 8 times negative 3 plus 1. Now I didn't take 8 times 1 because 1 is not in the parentheses. Let's simplify. 5 times t is 5t. 5 times negative 7 is negative 35. 8 times t is 8t. 8 times negative 3 is negative 24. And finally, plus 1. Let's continue to simplify. On the left side of the equal sign, we can't put anything together because they're not like terms. But on the right side of the equal sign, we have negative 24 plus 1, and we can simplify that. Now we have 5t minus 35 equals 8t minus 23. We want all the t's on one side and everything else on the other side. I like the t's or the variables on the left side. The opposite of a positive 8 is a negative 8. And I'm going to subtract negative 8 from both sides of the equal sign. This gives us negative 3t minus 35 equals negative 23. Now I need to get negative 3t by itself. The opposite of subtracting 35 is adding 35. So I'm going to add 35 to each side of the equal sign. This gives us negative 3t equals 12. Well, I don't want to know what negative 3t is. I want to know what t is. Anytime I have a number next to a letter, that means to multiply. The opposite of multiplying is dividing. So I'm going to divide by negative 3 on both sides of the equal sign. This gives us t equals negative 4, but we still need to check it. What we're going to do is put negative 4 in for t in our equation. Then we're going to follow the orders of operations. Negative 4 minus 7 is negative 11. Negative 4 minus 3 is negative 7. 5 times negative 11 is negative 55. 8 times negative 7 is negative 56 plus 1. Well, negative 56 plus 1 is negative 55. Since those are equal and negative 5 is true, it equals negative 5, t equals negative 4 is our solution. Now it's your turn to try all by yourself. This is the self quiz. You're going to pause the video, complete the questions, then press play to check. The whole idea is you're going to do these without looking back in your notes. Okay? Pause the video and complete the questions. All right, let's see how you did. We're going to solve 2 times 6w minus 9 equals negative 21 plus 3w. We need to simplify, and that means using the distributive property. I'm going to take 2 times 6w plus 2 times negative 9 equals negative 21 plus 3w. Let's continue to simplify. 2 times 6w is 12w, 2 times negative 9 is negative 18, and we still have it equal to negative 21 plus 3w. Now we want to get all the w's on one side of the equation and everything else on the other. I see positive 3w. Now the opposite of adding 3w is subtracting 3w. When I subtract 3w from both sides, I end up with 9w minus 18 equals negative 21. Now I need to get 9w by itself. I have minus 18. What's the opposite of subtracting 18? Yes, adding 18. So I'm going to add 18 to both sides of the equal sign. But now I need w by itself. Anytime I have a number next to a letter, that means to multiply. The opposite of multiplying is dividing. So I'm going to divide by 9 on both sides of the equal sign. This gives me w equals negative 1/3. Yeah, an answer can be a fraction. Did you check it? Well, let's check it together. I'm going to put negative 1/3 in for the w's. I need to simplify. I need to follow orders of operations. So 6 times negative 1/3 is actually negative 2, and 3 times negative 1/3 is negative 1. Negative 2 minus 9 is negative 11. 21 plus negative 1 is negative 22. And 2 times negative 11 is negative 22. Since negative 22 equals negative 22, that is true, then yes, our solution is w equals negative 1/3. Let's look at the second one. We're going to solve 144 equals 6 times negative 4 plus 4x. Now on the left side, we have 44. There's nothing to do there. But on the right side, we're going to use the distributive property. So we're going to have 144, 6 times negative 4, and then 6 times 4x. 144 equals 6 times negative 4 is negative 24, and 6 times 4x is 24x. We want to get all the variables on one side and everything else on the other side. Now for this one, 24x is all by itself on the right side. So we're going to get rid of the negative 24. So I'm going to add 24 to both sides of the equal sign, and that gives us 168 equals 24x. I still need to get x by itself. And anytime I have a number next to a letter, that means to multiply. And the opposite of multiplying is dividing. So we're going to divide by 24 on both sides of the equal sign. That gives us x equals 7. Well, let's check it just to make sure. I put 7 in for my x, and now we have to follow the orders of operations. 4 times 7 is 28. Negative 4 plus 28 is 24, and 6 times 24 is 144. So what does that mean? It means, yep, x equals 7 or 7 equals x. Let's look at the last one. Negative 2 times x plus 4 equals 7 times 3x minus 6 plus 5. When we simplify, we have to do the distributive property on the left side. I'm going to take negative 2 times x plus negative 2 times 4 equals, now once again, I have to do the distributive property. So I'm going to take 5 times 3x plus 5 times negative 6 plus 5. Now I didn't multiply the 5 times a 5 because the other 5 is not in the parentheses. Hopefully that makes sense. Let's simplify. Negative 2 times x is negative 2x. Negative 2 times 4 is negative 8. 5 times 3x is 15x. 5 times negative 6 is negative 30. And then we have the plus 5. We want to collect like terms. On the left side, we have negative 2x minus 8. Those are not like terms, so we cannot put them together. But on the right side, we have negative 30 plus 5, and we can put those together. So this gives us negative 2x minus 8 equals 15x minus 25. We want all the x's on one side, everything else on the other side. I like to put the x's on the left side, so the opposite of a positive 15x is a negative 15x. So I'm going to subtract 15x from both sides of the equal sign. This gives me negative 17x minus 8 equals negative 25. I need to get negative 17x by itself. The opposite of subtracting 8 is adding 8. So I'm going to add 8 to both sides of the equal sign. This gives us negative 17x equals negative 17. Well, I want x. I want x equal to something. Now, anytime I have a number next to a letter, that means to multiply. The opposite of multiplying is dividing. Now, we divide by whatever is hooked to the variable. And in this case, we're dividing by negative 17. This gives us 1. Yep, a negative divided by a negative is a positive. But now we need to check it. So what we're going to do is we're going to put 1 back in all of the x's in the original equation. We have to follow the orders of operations. So 1 plus 4 is 5. 3 times 1 is 3. 3 minus 6 is negative 3. 5 times negative 3 is negative 15. And negative 2 times 5 is negative 10. Negative 15 plus 5 is negative 10. Since negative 10 equals negative 10, and that's true, x equals 1 is our solution. So what are you going to do next? Well, practice, practice, practice. There are links to free worksheets with solutions in the description. Did you like it? Then like it. Did you really like it? Then subscribe. Did it help you? Then why don't you share it too? Remember, this is Pie Crushable Math Shorts. It's not magic, it's math.